What if I told you Sarah Jakes Roberts was following in her father T.D. Jakes' footsteps, but not in the way everyone assumed? Most people knew them as a powerful father-daughter team in the world of ministry, but you won't believe how deep this connection actually went. Let me tell you, this story wasn't just about faith or family. There was a hidden side filled with money, power, and calculated decisions. It all started looking like a spiritual journey, but behind the curtain, something much bigger was being built. People had always admired T.D. Jakes for his rise from humble beginnings to becoming a global icon. He wasn't just a pastor, he was a brand. His books became bestsellers, his conferences filled stadiums, and his sermons reached millions across the world. He had business partnerships, movie deals, and connections with celebrities. Many believed his journey was about spiritual calling, but this is where it gets interesting because every move he made seemed planned, timed, and highly profitable. And guess who had a front row seat to all of it? His daughter, Sarah. Sarah Jakes Roberts didn't come out of nowhere. She grew up watching her father build his empire brick by brick. From backstage at conferences to dinner table talks about strategy, she was listening, watching, and learning. But here's the twist. She wasn't just absorbing his faith, she was picking up his playbook. As she grew older and started her own journey, people thought she was simply inspired by him. But no, the craziest part was how closely her steps started to match his. At first, Sarah was known for her raw and powerful testimony. She shared her story of becoming a mother at 14, going through heartbreak, and finding her way back to faith. Her honesty won people over, but slowly her voice turned into a brand. She wrote books that didn't just inspire people, they sold out in numbers that made publishers take notice. This is how she built her foundation. And then she launched Women Evolve, a platform that wasn't just spiritual, it was also a business. Courses, merchandise, podcasts, speaking events, every piece brought in money, influence, and growth. Just like her father, Sarah started understanding the value of media. Her Instagram became a carefully crafted space. Her YouTube channel gained followers fast. Her events began looking a lot like her father's massive conferences, high production value, powerful messaging, and multiple ticket tiers. People felt blessed, yes, but they also paid to attend. And while many applauded her rise, others started whispering, was she preaching or profiting? It got more intense when insiders began revealing that T.D. Jakes had been personally guiding Sarah behind the scenes, not just as a father, but as a mentor in branding, finance, and long-term vision. And this is where it gets shocking. Sources close to the family said that every major move Sarah made was discussed at length with T.D. Jakes. This wasn't coincidence. This was legacy building. Sarah mirrored her father in ways the public didn't notice right away. While T.D. Jakes had turned sermons into media deals, Sarah turned podcasts into digital empires. He had books and movie scripts. She had conferences and coaching programs. He wore suits in front of thousands. She stood in front of sold-out crowds in heels and style, commanding attention not just with scripture, but with business confidence. Destiny took an unexpected turn, and it looked a lot like a blueprint being passed from one generation to the next. But here's what made it even more intriguing. Sarah wasn't just copying her father. She was adapting. She understood today's generation better, spoke their language, and built a brand that didn't just touch hearts, it opened wallets. And as her popularity grew, so did the questions. How much of this was ministry and how much of it was marketing? And more importantly, what was the cost of this success? As Sarah Jakes Roberts continued to rise, something unusual began to happen. The more she succeeded, the more people started comparing her to her father, but not in a flattering way. The whispers turned into questions, and the questions started turning into criticism. Her conferences were packed, her books were bestsellers, and her social media had turned her into a global voice for modern faith. But people weren't just asking how she got there, they were starting to ask why it all looked so familiar. Many pointed out that Sarah's events were structured just like T.D. Jakes' legendary Woman Thou Art Loosed conferences, down to the VIP tickets, merchandise tables, meet and greets, and branded content. These events felt more like business expos than church gatherings. And then came the backlash. Critics began to say it out loud. Was faith becoming a product? But let me tell you, this is where the story takes a sharp turn. Sarah didn't ignore the criticism. In fact, she leaned into it. She began addressing money openly in her messages. She talked about financial literacy, business strategy, and wealth creation, but from the pulpit. And while some applauded her for breaking the silence around money in ministry, others felt deeply uncomfortable. Some pastors even called her approach too commercial, saying it blurred the sacred and the secular in a way that left little room for spiritual purity. Still, Sarah didn't back down. And this is how you know she was raised in a world of strategy. Instead of fighting the backlash directly, she started shifting the narrative. She told her audience that wealth wasn't the enemy of faith, that in fact, being financially stable helped you serve your purpose better. It was a bold stance. And once again, it mirrored her father's philosophy almost word for word. T.D. Jakes had long believed that being spiritual didn't mean being poor. His empire proved that. But he had also faced decades of pushback from people who felt his million-dollar lifestyle didn't match his message. Sarah, it seemed, was now walking the exact same path, but she had social media as a weapon of defense. Every time someone criticized her for being too flashy or too business-minded, she had thousands of supporters ready to defend her in the comments, repost her videos, and quote her in captions. But here's the craziest part. Sarah's brand started getting even bigger because of the controversy. People love a scandal, and the more her name was thrown around, the more people tuned in. More podcast plays, more followers, more ticket sales. Even her haters were helping her grow. It was the kind of momentum that no ad budget could buy. And behind all of it, some believed, was the steady hand of her father, offering silent advice from years of experience. Now, here's where it got truly layered. Insiders claimed that T.D. Jakes wasn't just supporting Sarah from the sidelines. He was actively shaping the path. There were meetings, financial advice, branding sessions. It wasn't just a father helping a daughter. It was a master teaching his student how to hold the reins of a legacy. They weren't building two separate ministries. They were building a dynasty. But here's the shocking part. Most of the public didn't see this collaboration. They thought Sarah was doing it all on her own. This mystery around how much of Sarah's empire was her vision versus how much came from her father's influence made everything feel even more controversial. And as people kept guessing, the real truth stayed locked behind closed doors. But what was clear was that Sarah wasn't slowing down. In fact, her next moves looked even more ambitious. As Sarah Jakes Roberts' platform kept growing, so did the stakes. Her brand was no longer just a name, it was a machine. From best-selling books and viral sermons to ticketed events and brand deals, everything was running like a business. But with that success came an uncomfortable question. Where was the line between ministry and marketing? People inside the church community started speaking out more boldly. Some respected pastors began calling this new style of ministry faith-fluencing, turning spirituality into content, followers into customers, and sermons into sales funnels. And guess what? Sarah's name kept coming up in those conversations. Many wondered, was she preaching the gospel or building a brand? But here's what made this story different. Sarah never denied the business side of her ministry. In fact, she started owning it. She talked openly about growing up watching her father balance faith and finances. She said she learned from his successes and from his mistakes. She often told stories about T.D. Jakes sitting her down and teaching her how to read contracts, how to protect her intellectual property, and how to build something that would last beyond a single sermon. But this is where it gets interesting because while some fans saw Sarah as a bold, modern leader who was redefining church for a new generation, others started noticing a pattern. Every time TD Jakes slowed down or stepped back from the spotlight, Sarah stepped up with something new: a new book, a new podcast series, a new tour, a new brand partnership. It almost felt like a handoff was happening, not just spiritually, but financially and strategically. And then came the moment that confirmed what many had suspected all along. In a surprise announcement, TD Jakes officially handed over a part of his platform, Woman Thou Art Loosed, to Sarah's Woman Evolve. It wasn't just symbolic, it was a business move, a passing of the torch, and the blending of two powerhouse brands into one unified empire. The transition wasn't just emotional, it was planned, years in the making. And that's when people realized destiny didn't just take an unexpected turn, it followed a blueprint. The announcement sent shockwaves through the faith community. For some, it was empowering, a father trusting his daughter to lead the next generation. For others, it confirmed their worst fears, that ministry was now being franchised like a business, passed down like a corporation, and controlled like an empire. The criticism got louder, but so did Sarah's confidence. She responded by leaning further into her mission. She started creating mentorship programs, business courses, and content aimed at helping other women learn how to build influence and income while staying rooted in faith. It wasn't just about the church anymore. It was about community, empowerment, and financial freedom. She called it faith in action. Her critics called it faith for profit. But here's the shocking part. None of it slowed her down. In fact, the more people questioned her, the more visible she became. TD Jakes, always known for playing the long game, stayed largely quiet during this time. But those close to the family said this was all part of the plan. Let Sarah take the spotlight. Let her take the hits. Let her evolve. After the Woman Thou Art Loose transition, Sarah Jakes Roberts wasn't just TD Jakes' daughter anymore. She became the face of a new era. The empire that TD had built over decades now had a second wind, powered by a younger, more relatable voice. But with this passing of the torch came something deeper: responsibility. And not just to preach, to protect the brand, to keep the influence alive, to expand it. And that's where the pressure truly began. Sarah had now stepped into a space where every decision she made was under a microscope. A sermon wasn't just a sermon anymore, it was a brand move. A podcast episode could trigger controversy or drive revenue. A single post could go viral, inspire millions, or spark outrage. The spotlight was hotter than ever, and yet she kept moving forward. But here's the twist most people miss. What looked like confidence on the outside was at times a battle behind the scenes. Sources close to the family revealed that Sarah struggled with the dual roles she now carried. Being a spiritual leader and a businesswoman isn't easy, especially when the world expects you to do both without flaw. Some insiders even said that Sarah had moments where she questioned if she was being true to herself or just following a script written years ago by her father. Because yes, she had learned from TD Jakes, but at what cost? Was she building her own vision or carrying out someone else's? But this is what makes her story different. Sarah didn't run from that question. She brought it into her message. She started talking about identity, about pressure, about legacy. She began to openly say that she wasn't trying to be the next TD Jakes. She was building what God gave her, and that shift, it changed everything. Her messaging got sharper. Her platform grew even stronger. And this time, it felt fully her own. Yet the controversy never completely faded. Critics continued to point out the luxurious events, the monetized platforms, the high-end partnerships. The question remained, was it still ministry, or had it become a business with a sermon attached? But Sarah had already answered that. She said financial growth didn't cancel out spiritual depth, that being strategic didn't mean being fake, and that building wealth was a form of legacy protection, not self enrichment. Still, as her empire expanded, so did the complexity. Her team grew, her projects multiplied. She began entering spaces her father had never touched: fashion collaborations, mental health advocacy, tech startups. It was no longer just about continuing TD Jake's vision. It was about creating her own world, with his wisdom as a guide, but not as a cage. And that's where destiny truly took an unexpected turn. Because what started as a daughter mirroring her father's footsteps turned into a woman reshaping what those footsteps could even look like. In the end, the story of Sarah Jakes Roberts and TD Jakes isn't just about faith. It's about power, influence, money, legacy, and evolution. Some will always see it as controversial, others will see it as revolutionary. But one thing is clear: this isn't just a story about a father and daughter. It's the rise of a dynasty.